Hello, YouTube. I've been waiting to make this channel since I started testosterone back in April of 2018. My name is Kyran, Kyran, and this is my coming out story. The reason I haven't done this sooner is because I was waiting to get a new phone to make decent recordings, as well as not ever having time to record myself in a silent, quiet environment. I decided to start this today after reading The God of Jane, in which Jane, the author, talks about mortality and living records and how our perspective of our lives changes over time. And I realized that with the deletion of my Tumblr and Facebook, there's not really any way for me to chronologically look at my life anymore. And it's always taken a brave part of myself to look back on recordings of myself prior to starting my transition, because it didn't really feel like me. And so I decided to come here to tell my story because it needs to exist somewhere. There's that Twitter post about the real loss of LGBTQIA lives. The real loss of LGBTQIA lives is that our parents never really get to know who we are. And my sister passed away. My oldest sister, Rachel, passed away when I was 9 years old. And I realized that through watching my parents curate her life, that if anything were ever to happen to me, with my lack of social media, there really isn't a recording of what's been going on with me for the last year and a half. And so I am here to tell my story to you. I guess I should begin with a lot of questions come when you decide, well, not when you decide, but when you come out as trans. And the one that I most often get is, how did you realize you were trans? And that is a long story, but I will explain it briefly. I realized that I was trans when I started to have dreams in puberty in which I would wish with all of my might that I was born as a cis man. And for those who don't know, cis means your gender identity agrees with your assignment at birth. So I was born a woman, but I've been trans my whole life. And I realized that it wasn't normal to wish that you were the other gender, but I was very steeped in denial. So at that point in my life, I turned to the internet. I was super depressed. As I said, my sister passed away, and then my other sister, Amy, left for college. And so I was sort of at the mercy of my parents' upbringing, and my parents are two conservative Lutherans. And they are much older than most people my age's parents. Most people's grandparents are the same age as my parents. So it's not that they're outdated on things, it's just that they're very set in their dogma, and that's okay. Everybody's entitled to their own religious beliefs, their own beliefs about gay people and trans people, and I'm not here to impose my view on anybody, but I do think that everybody is entitled to the kind of existence that they want as long as it doesn't harm another human being. And so I turned to the internet, and again, here I am turning to the internet. I turned to the internet as a form of escapism because I felt like I was dying. I felt like there was a part of me that was never able to be expressed in my actual life. And so I knew that I liked women. I knew that I liked women from a very young age. And when you start to go through puberty, you have all of these hormones and all of these emotions and everything that's going on. And I decided that the way that I wanted to connect with the world was through my art. And so, art and video games. And so I started playing RuneScape. And anybody who doesn't know, old school RuneScape is the shit. And I, along with my friend Kayla, started telling women on the internet, because we didn't really know. I mean, we knew what gay people were, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, and that's not necessarily common, or it wasn't common in the early 2000s. So I started catfishing before that term was even coined, before I even knew what it was. We started telling people that, and Kayla is not trans, Kayla's just gay. She just did this for fun and probably to make me feel more comfortable about it. But yeah, I didn't realize that that was not normal. I just thought that most people woke up and wished that they were in a different body. And that caused a lot of dissociation and a lot of guilt. The first time that I saw MTV's Catfish, I had been catfishing for about a decade. I had dated multiple women, and the girl I was dating at the time was considering coming to Carnegie Mellon University for school while I was at Pitt. And I had certain rules when I catfished people. I wouldn't let them send me anything. I had people offer to send me money. And I just, with a guilty conscience, I couldn't do it. I knew that I had to hold myself to a higher standard. And I knew that there was something wrong, but I didn't realize what that was with the upbringing and environment that I was in. And so, and this was just around the time Tumblr started to become really gay and trans friendly. So I kind of got a sense of what was coming, but I didn't know how to execute that in my own life. And so I told Gabby, who was my girlfriend at the time, through the influence of my best friend Pat, when I told him finally what was going on, because he had just assumed that all of these people were really close friends with me. And there were suspicion, of course, why I couldn't video chat her. It's pretty much impossible to catfish now, or it's not nearly as easy as it was in the early 2000s. And I don't say that to endorse catfishing. I'm just saying I think it's an interesting cultural phenomenon. And so I told Gabby the truth, and I never really had to address the problem at the time because Gabby accepted me for who I was and what I had done to her, and loved me for the person I was, not for being a cis man. And so I entered a period of my life where I didn't have to address it at all. I could just be a lesbian and be proud of who I was for the first time, and I thought that was that. I was happy for the first time since my sister passed, like really happy without depression. And so I lived in pretty much blissful existence, because ignorance is bliss, for 5 years. And then I started experimenting with a lot of hallucinogens and weed and everything that comes with that, as a means of escapism again, to get out of my own body. And I was diagnosed in last year, 2018, with a disorder called schizoaffective disorder. Schizoaffective disorder is the unholy offspring between schizophrenia and bipolar. And I experience more depressed symptoms than I do manic. But when I have the combination of manic and paranoia, it's really, really not pretty. But around the same time, I also realized that I was trans. And that came about from the support of the people around me, honestly, and the intolerance of having to live my life as anything other than what I truly was. And so during my psychosis, I went to the clinic around where I live, and they, without a second glance, looked at me and the way I was presenting and the way I spoke about how I knew I wanted to transition, and they ordered me a prescription of testosterone. Unfortunately, my psychosis kicked in, and I thought that it was a conspiracy to make me infertile. I thought that my parents would hate my guts, and so I just couldn't do it. I decided at that time that it wasn't the right decision that I needed to be making, and I delayed it. And then after I started to get on the right meds and take care of myself and be a generally more happy person, I was at a schizophrenia conference with my certified peer specialist and my therapist, and I left at the middle of the conference because I knew that I needed to go to the clinic, and I knew that I needed to start at that point to make decisions for myself, because I may be mentally ill and I may be trans, but those things are not mutually exclusive, and I will repeat that again. Being trans and mentally ill are not the same thing, and I hope that I watch this video the next time I have a psychotic episode and know that from a place of sincere sanity that those things are not the same thing. And I hope that the internet rallies to support me in a way that my family does not. So I went and started testosterone, and I haven't made any sort of progress benchmark, just because I have been too intimidated to share my story with the internet. But around this time, I have been heavily considering top surgery, and know that it's something that I want to do but can't necessarily afford. So I'm trying to extend my horizons. I am now in a much better place in my life. I'm ready to share my story and talk to people who may be questioning, who may not know things about trans individuals, who may have questions. And I'm excited to meet other trans men because we are valid and we do exist, and our stories aren't necessarily easy to tell. And I guess my worst nightmare is dying without some sort of record of who I actually am. And so it's my commitment to this YouTube channel to share what's going on with me, with my friends and family and the people that I trust, and also with a community that exists that I can't necessarily see yet because I haven't made myself accessible to it. And so, hello YouTube. My name's Kyron. It's nice to meet you all, and I hope that you are along for the journey as I attempt to become the man of my dreams. Signing off.